So my last topic today is climate change. So these are some of the expected physical effects of climate change. Increased storminess means storms that are more extreme. Ones that we used to have less frequently will now be happening more often. Increasing temperatures. So models show that maximum temperatures in Morro Bay would increase by about 6.6 degrees Fahrenheit by the middle of the century. Increasing drought. So again, models for Morro Bay show a decrease in average rainfall by 2.5 inches a year. So of course, if it's drier, we have greater risk for wildfires. There's sea level rise, oceans acidifying, flooding, and saltwater intrusion. So we have a somewhat local example of these physical effects of climate change. This is an aerial photo of Montecito. And you may recall the events there from late 2017, early 2018 are a good example of the physical effects of climate change. So first of all, our area was experiencing a 5-year drought. So here we are, increasing drought. Of course, the result of that increasing drought is increasing wildfires. So this area suffered from the Thomas Fire in late 2017, which really decimated the area. And then next we had increased storminess. So we had a very intense rainstorm in January of 2018. Records show that as much as half an inch of rain was falling in a 5-minute period. And so that resulted in flooding. So a wall of water and mud came tearing through the Montecito area. I believe it killed 21 people and it caused millions of dollars of property damage. So of course, for those of us living on the coast, sea level rise is a very big concern. It is thought that there's been an increase in the average sea levels of 8 to 9 inches over the past century. It's predicted that we'll have at least a foot of global average sea level rise by the end of this century. And the reasons the seas are rising, 2 main reasons: ocean warming, so that's water, when it is warmer, expands. It's called thermal expansion. And so then the warmer water is taking up more space. And then there's ice sheet melts. So the Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheets melting is also causing ocean levels to rise. And the amount of sea level rise we see depends on the greenhouse gas emissions that humans produce. So this graph developed by NOAA, the black and gray lines show observed historical data of sea levels and how they've changed over time. And then these colored portions show the future and give us an idea of where we might end up based on our emissions levels. So these low and intermediate low levels, those are based on greenhouse gas scenarios that were established in the Paris Treaty. That was a global climate treaty that President Obama signed. And that would, if we followed those emissions goals, then we would have less than half a meter of sea level rise by the end of the century. The intermediate and intermediate high scenarios, that's if our emissions continue to rise through the middle of the century, and then we manage to taper them off and lower them to 1990 levels, then we'd see about 1.5 meters of sea level rise. And this end of the curve, the extreme and the high emissions scenarios, that's if we continue to see emissions rise through the middle of the century, and then those emissions just plateau, but they don't decrease, then we could see up to 2.5 meters of sea level rise by the end of the century. So of course, those of us living on the coast are very concerned about this. This has real impacts on our daily lives. USGS developed a model called Cosmos to look at impacts to coastal communities from sea level rise. And you can look at very localized data and see what different sea level rise scenarios look like. So I figured I'd pick an area that was familiar to you. So I put in Morro Bay High School. And so this is Morro Bay High School with 2 meters of sea level rise, so about 8 feet. And so the strand is gone, it's underwater. And then a good portion of the high school, the fields are covered by water. So then if you add to this storm surge, say we have higher seas and then we also get a 100-year storm, then that looks like this. And so I believe with the new construction, have some buildings on this portion of the campus. And so those are definitely in danger from rising seas. I also took a look at the Embarcadero area. So this is 2 meters of sea level rise with a 100-year storm surge. So that means a storm that is so big that on average it would only occur once every 100 years. And so you can see with water levels that the rock is practically an island, that the sand spit has been breached. The old power plant site is completely underwater. A good bit of the Embarcadero would also be underwater. And then Grassy Island is completely inundated. So as you can imagine, there are quite a few impacts to us, both economically. There's a lot of infrastructure on the Embarcadero that would be directly impacted, and then also impacts to habitats. So this is South Bay Boulevard. This is the State Park Golf Course, State Park Marina. And so this is the Salt Marsh area. You probably all see it, maybe some of you every day on your commute to school. And so you see the marsh plants and you see these little rivulets, creeks coming through. With sea level rise, this area will be inundated more often, which means these marsh plants are going to die off, and this area will convert from a marsh to a mud flat. So it would look quite different.